Hi everyone， 大家好，很开心有这个机会可以跟大家分享，台湾的一些好玩的地方，还有就是说台湾在一些方面是在发展的地方。I've also lived in Taiwan longer than I've lived in America. I've spent more than half of my life in Taiwan. I am a permanent resident of Taiwan, so I think I identify myself maybe not so much as an American-Taiwanese, but as an American who has a very deep affection for Taiwan and has been very influenced by Taiwan. My observations, well, Taiwan definitely went through a period of anxiety and nervousness towards the early part of the pandemic, when Taiwan wasn't sure that there had been a lot of community transmission. But fortunately, through a lot of measures taken very early on, such as closing the borders and encouraging and then requiring people to wear masks, doing contact tracing, enforcing quarantine. It's been quite a long time, I think about 3 months, since there's been any community transmission. So in that sense, life is somewhat normal in Taiwan. We still need to wear masks on public transportation and things like that, but I guess still the tourism industry is quite impacted. Domestic tourism obviously has increased because Taiwanese can't go abroad right now either, and people can't come in. So basically, tourism industry-wise, we're completely depending on domestic tourism. So for those of us who do rely on international tourists, this has been a bit of a trying time. Well, I think Taiwan can really help the world by sharing more of its experience. I know that more and more international media outlets have been interviewing government officials. For example, the former vice president was an epidemiologist. He was the one who dealt with the SARS epidemic, and I know that I've seen the digital minister, Audrey Tang, on CNN talking about what Taiwan has done in terms of a culture that cares. You know, these things like wearing masks is not about whether this is something comfortable for us to do. I mean, wearing a mask, I know it's hot outside, isn't all that comfortable a thing to do, but I think in Taiwan people are willing to rally together and say, because this helps everyone, I'm willing to do it. And so I think there's this very good culture or phenomenon here of people willing to say, I want to do my part to help. My remaining family is pretty much concentrated in Florida at the moment, although I'm originally from Los Angeles. And so, at the beginning when this whole mask issue came about, there was some hesitation too in wearing masks, but, I've tried to share, just as I mentioned, the Taiwan experience and that it really does work. And I think they have seen more and more that what I'm saying is right. I just feel it's unfortunate that a lot of my friends and family in Taiwan don't really know very much about Taiwan still. They only know about what basically we share in conversations. But, I'd really hope, since I've spent so much time here in Taiwan, that my friends and family would want to spend more time maybe on Google learning about Taiwan, but that really hasn't happened yet. In terms of the indigenous aspect, Taiwan is very important because some scholars believe that Taiwan is the origin of the Austronesian language family, which is a very large family in terms of geographical distribution, and includes Taiwan, which is at the northernmost point, but also New Zealand, the Maori of New Zealand, down to the southernmost point, and then all the way out to Madagascar, and then many of the small South Pacific nations as well. And so Taiwan, in that sense, is very historically important in terms of indigenous culture. I think I've been traveling to indigenous communities for, I guess it would be 22 years or so now. And I really went in, of course, with very deep respect for the culture and the people, and I really wanted to understand the people and the culture. I didn't start out trying to do tours. I was just very, very interested in the culture. And it took a very long time, actually about 15 years, before some Indigenous people started saying to me that they 认同 or agreed or identified with what I was trying to do. And I think that having that kind of acceptance is very important. Because now that I am doing tours, they know that I'm doing them with the right intention. Definitely I want to make sure that benefits go to the Indigenous communities, and that Indigenous communities, people in Indigenous communities also have the chance to interact with people from other countries, my clients who travel with me. In recent years too, it's been great because more and more Indigenous young people have been asking me, why is it me, an American-Taiwanese, who is doing these kinds of tours to Indigenous communities and not Indigenous people? And I think that's really wonderful that they're asking that question, because it actually should be Indigenous people doing this, not me. And so I really hope that by trying to create a model for Indigenous travel that does bring benefits to Indigenous communities, that more young people will want to step up and start doing this, and that they will take over and continue to offer really unique and valuable experiences to international travelers. Well, in terms of, there's been a lot of land that's Indigenous traditional land that was taken away, and it's a bit difficult because Taiwan being a small island, land is at such a premium here, so that makes it somewhat difficult, but it's something that I think many Indigenous people aspire to and would like to see happen. So I don't know what will happen in terms of having land being given back to the Indigenous people. But I know that there has been an effort to survey traditional names of places. So instead of using, most places are now named in Chinese, because Mandarin is the official language of Taiwan. But there's also been a survey of what was this place that's now called this in Chinese, what was its indigenous name. And so a lot of surveying and research has been done on that, with a view to trying to restore at least some of the lands to the Indigenous people. The basis of this process is to increase an understanding of Indigenous culture and to bring more benefits in society, in economy, in education, and in every aspect, to be able to get their lands back. But I think I want to speak more to the first point, which was the understanding part. Still among many, well, I know there's still a lack of understanding among mainstream Taiwanese as to Indigenous culture. For example, they may look at some ceremonies, like one of the very popular ceremonies that's going on in the summertime here in Taiwan is the Harvest Festival of the Amis tribe, and that's happening in eastern Taiwan. Now, a lot of people, what they see of this particular ceremony is usually the grand finale of when the deities are sent, back to the heavens, and so there's a huge send-off. So it looks like a huge party. There's dancing and singing and all of that, and outsiders can usually participate in the dance circle, and it is a very fun event. But then people sort of misunderstand this and think that it's just a party, but actually has a very deep and sacred meaning. And there's actually about 1.5-2 months of preparation that has to go into this particular festival or set of ceremonies that outsiders don't see, and so a lot of misunderstanding comes out of that. I things are improving, but they're still among the mainstream Taiwanese population, which is mostly Han Chinese. There's still a lot of negative stereotypes about Indigenous people, that they like to drink. It seems almost every time I say I'm going to Indigenous community, oh, you're going there to drink Millet Liquor with them. Okay, actually most of my Indigenous friends don't drink. And if they do, they don't drink a lot. And Millet Liquor traditionally was something that was very precious. Millet is a grain that was a staple grain of most of Taiwan's Indigenous peoples traditionally. And many of the ceremonies and rites had to do with growing that particular grain and harvesting it and storing it. But what Millet Liquor means is that once all the millet was harvested and put into granaries, so to be stored up for the winter or more difficult times, and those were completely full. If there was any millet left over, that could be used to make millet liquor. There usually wasn't a lot, and usually it was the chieftain, the elders, who had access to it first. So by the time it came to the young people's turn, there really wasn't anything left. So there really was no traditional drinking culture among the Indigenous people. And actually in many Indigenous languages in Taiwan, there was no word for liquor. It was often described as being spicy water or water that makes you less shy. So people misunderstand that. And they also see Indigenous people as maybe not being as committed to careers or not being as hardworking. And that's not true. Many of the Indigenous people I know are very hardworking people. I work with many people in Indigenous communities who put in a lot of effort to try to build up their communities, to try and preserve their cultures, to preserve the nature that's in and around their communities. So a lot of these are just negative stereotypes that have just stuck around for a long time. Talking about misunderstanding, I've sometimes had Taiwanese friends say to me, hey, why are there so many more new tribes now? And it's not that these tribes were new, it's just that there was a adjustment to the classification. A lot of these tribe names, classifications came about during during the Japanese occupation of Taiwan. And for those who don't know, that was 1895 to 1945. And so there were Japanese scholars, anthropologists who came to Taiwan and researched Taiwan's Indigenous people. But there was also a lot of communication issues. And so some of their classifications were later found to be not correct, that some people were classified into one tribe, but they actually weren't part of this tribe. They had their own language, their own ceremonies, a different culture. And so in recent years, since I've been here, just as you mentioned, when I came, there were 9 officially recognized Indigenous tribes in Taiwan. And so since I've been here is now, as of 2014, I believe, is when the 15th and 16th tribes were recognized. And there are still more that are trying to seek recognition and that way be able to receive some resources, receive some exposure, and be able to do a lot more than they can now. Recognition really revolves around language. A tribe has to have a person, at least one person who can speak their language, their native language fluently. And so I know there are some tribes that are struggling with that. So for example, the 15th and 16th tribes that were recognized, they had 3 people and I think about a dozen people respectively who could speak their language fluently. So it wasn't a large number of people, but fortunately they did. And then another aspect is traditional clothing. You have to be able to revive your traditional clothing. And you also have to be able to revive your traditional ceremonies. And then the fourth aspect was one we just talked about in terms of land. You need to be able to identify your traditional territories. And if your traditional territories overlap with a neighboring tribe, you need to carry out dialogue and discussions and negotiations about that so that you can settle all of your boundaries for your tribe. So it is a somewhat difficult process. Well, I guess just to give a plug, the book is called The Real Taiwan in the Dutch, and the English version was just updated early this year and is now available as an ebook on Amazon. And then in terms of the Dutch perspective, the Dutch were here as the Dutch East India Company. So they were here to do business. And so they really wanted to explore Taiwan for what trading opportunities it could offer. But during that time, they knew it was important to interact and, if possible, to get along with the local people, including the indigenous people, and there were also some Chinese and some Japanese people here as well. So they didn't just stay in their base, which was in Tainan in southern Taiwan. They really traveled all over Taiwan. And so they had interactions with all sorts of people, some friendly, not so friendly. But their perspective was that Taiwan was in a very strategic location for them in terms of commerce, and that Taiwan had, and well, it still has, but that's 17th century, had many resources. And so the Dutch did want to stay in Taiwan for the long term, but they were forced out by a Ming Dynasty warlord who's known as Kaksinga. So they were forced to leave about 1662 from Taiwan. But basically, some of the Dutch, they had married with local women, indigenous women. Some were missionaries who were working to convert indigenous people to Christianity and were heavily involved in the indigenous communities at that time. And so there definitely was some hesitance to leave. And so it's said that actually not all Dutch left Taiwan in the 17th century. Some did stay on. It's possible that there weren't enough ships for them to leave on. So, for example, it's said that some of the Dutch fled up into the mountains of Alishan with the Indigenous Zou Tribe, and that there's some relation with two particular clans of the Zou Tribe, the An clan and the Yang clan. And so the Dutch have left behind a lot of interesting stories. When we researched the book, 2008 to 2010, we came across many people. Indigenous people were like, oh yes, we think we have Dutch ancestry. We think we have Dutch blood because, they heard stories from their elders of the Dutch people being in their communities and marrying local women. So it's a very interesting perspective. It has been quite a few years now, but I saw them perform at a concert. It was actually a concert for the soft opening of what is the National Taichung Theater in central Taiwan, and I was amazed at their talent, and even more amazed when I found out that they had been struggling financially. They had to depend on donations of used instruments and fix them up or make their own instruments, and just how resilient and how devoted they were to keeping up their training and being able to perform. At that time was mostly in Taiwan, and how much their music teacher had also devoted to encouraging them and helping this group to grow and develop. And definitely in Taiwan, this group has in recent years really gained in fame. And so I had really hoped that they could go to TAIWANfest in Canada, because I think the people who visit TAIWANfest would also be amazed. And it's a very interesting combination because they play classical music, but they usually, when they perform, they're dressed in traditional indigenous clothing. So it's a very interesting blend of cultures. This particular group is from Nantou County, which is in central Taiwan, and it's considered the origin of the Untitled Tribe, and also another tribe, in Chinese, the Saidake tribe. And the Bunong tribe also lived there. So it's a very, very important area for several tribes. So, but the Atayal Overture, I believe, is also important because of where they live being so important to Atayal tribe history. I usually suggest not to come in the summertime because it is quite hot. It rains a lot. There can be typhoons. But any other time of the year is quite good to come. Fall, spring, winter, those are all really great times to visit Taiwan and to visit the mountains of Taiwan. I do custom-made tours. So I would suggest, if you want to have a really in-depth experience, the longer you can stay, the better. At least 3 days. You could definitely do a week, 2 weeks, even more. And what you want to do really depends on the amount of time you have and what you want to see. Some people are very interested in traditional arts, contemporary arts of indigenous people. Some people are interested in the hunting culture. Some people just want to do more hiking and maybe explore some of the historic trails in the indigenous communities, or to maybe just spend time along a river, or swimming in a pool under a waterfall. And those are all absolutely things that you can do in indigenous communities, or spending time with elders and learning about the legends of the tribe. Or spending time with young people who might just come out with a guitar at night and sit around a fire and just chat and listen to music. So there's really so many things that can be done in indigenous communities, and food as well. I know Taiwanese food is more and more popular and getting to be well known around the world. But really, one of the cuisines that it's difficult to find outside of Taiwan is indigenous cuisine. So people can have the chance to try that cuisine. They can even study this cuisine, from local women, and really have a chance to interact with them. So one of the things I really emphasize is the interaction with the local people. I think this is just a really wonderful experience for people to learn from them, and as I mentioned before, for indigenous people to also learn from others. It's a really great way to have some very meaningful exchanges. I talked a little bit about the Indigen Zou Tribe, which is living in Alishan. Alishan is in southern Taiwan, in Chiayi County, and it's a pretty famous tourist destination. People usually like to ride the mountain railway. It's one of only about 3 such railways in the world. So people are railway enthusiasts. That's really something to do. A lot of people like to go to the National Forest Recreation Area in Alishan and see the sunrise. The Zou communities don't get as much attention, but they are also in areas of really beautiful nature with rivers, forest areas. And so there are 8 Zou communities in the Alishan area, and all of them are worth visiting. Each one is different, although they do belong to the same tribe. So I would definitely recommend a visit there. One thing that most Taiwanese don't know is that we mentioned there are 16 officially recognized tribes, but there are actually hundreds and hundreds of indigenous communities of those tribes. And so that means that there are hundreds and hundreds of places to visit that they might not have visited. So I would definitely recommend that they explore places beyond the famous, or beyond those that are on Instagram. Those places are great, not to say that they shouldn't be visited, but I think if people really want to know their country more, I really encourage them to spend more time in the mountains. Taiwan's mountains are beautiful, and to really get to know the really rich culture of Indigenous people. And there are Indigenous communities all over Taiwan, from the north to the center to the south to the east, and even on the offshore island of Orchid Island, or what's called 兰屿 in Chinese. 真的希望是台湾人，就是当然因为疫情这个时候就没有办法出国，可是真的希望是会用这个时间这个机会去探索台湾的山上的原住民部落。那就是说虽然就是很多像日月潭、太鲁阁这些地方真的不错，可是真的想要深深的了解台湾的文化，其实可以体验台湾原住民部落的生活。那其实就是说好消息，就是说台湾有16个族，可是其实部落是不是只有16个，有好几百个，所以真的是蛮多选择。那就是说是看你是比较想要就是说比较深山里面，或是也许在比较靠近海边，其实是太多选择。那就是鼓励你们就是可以上网去找一些部落的一些资讯，那就是真的是可以有一个非常好的还有就是很有特色的体验。谢谢。Yeah, welcome and stay safe and stay healthy.